Hi and hello everyone. Welcome to Scholarshu4u YouTube channel. Myself is Ravindra Babu. I'm the faculty of Indian Polity and I have 24 years of experience in teaching at various levels in regular academic colleges and coaching centers. I worked as a faculty and now I'm in front of you to deal the subject Indian polity. So today I would like to start this session with some basic concepts and basic terminology which is essential for understanding the subject of polity. Here, so Indian polity is a subject which is having very importance in competitive examinations. Being a student or the aspirant of various types of examinations, we need to understand what is this subject. Basically, polity is a study of political institutions and the system, political system, how it is working. So there are various types of associations or institutions in this society. It is the political or the system which is related with political institutions or associations. As a subject, this polity emerged as an independent discipline by the Greek philosophers. If you see, the quest for knowledge began among the Greek philosophers for the first time around 4th century BC. The Greek philosophers, they acquired knowledge and they made a systematic study for developing various types of subjects according to their interests. So the polity subject is developed by the Greek philosopher who is called as a father of Indian polity. He is nothing but Aristotle. A Greek philosopher, Aristotle is regarded as father of polity. He is called as father of polity because for the first time he studied the constitutions of Greek city-states. He made comparative study and analysis of different constitutions existing in those city-states. So he made a contribution for a systematic study of this subject. So he is regarded as father of polity. Right? Not only for Indian polity, he is father of polity as a subject. Now, coming to the concept of this Indian polity, the subject which is basically deals with the constitution, so in order to understand some basic aspects of polity subject, we need to start with the concept of constitution. So what is constitution, which is called as constitution, and what it contains? So constitution, it is a basic law, or we can say fundamental law of a state. So constitution is a basic or fundamental law of a state. So this constitution, it contains the rules and regulations, or we can say the terms and conditions for the maintenance of state affairs. It is the embodiment of certain rules and regulations which are designed or codified by the experts. So a constitution contains the terms and conditions for the functioning of political system. So the structure of a state is designed, or we can say the structure of any state can be built based on the provisions of this constitution. The entire structure and functioning of all the political institutions, organizations, they run according to the provisions of this constitution. So it is regarded as a basic or fundamental because the whole nation is running based on these provisions of the constitution. Coming to the types of constitutions, right? If you are able to understand what is constitution, then we could go for the types of constitution. So in this world, there are some constitutions. They are classified based on the form of the constitution, or we can classify the constitution into rigid or a flexible constitution based on the process followed for the amendment of the constitution. So let us see what kind of types of or forms of constitutions are there. So if you see the types of constitution, so there are popular constitution, 4 types of constitutions are there in the world. We can classify these constitutions. The first classification is based on the form of the constitution. Based on the form of the constitution, we can classify into 2 types. Right? So based on this form of the constitutions, we can classify them into written constitution and unwritten constitution. It is one type of classification of the constitutions. So literally we can understand written constitution is one which is in the written form. A written constitution contains all the provisions which are in the written form in a documentation. Or we can say the constitutional proposals which are codified in a document. So the provisions of the constitution, if they are in written form, it is called as a written constitution. The first written constitution in this world is a USA Constitution. After this American Revolution, after 1728, so this American Constitution, USA Constitution was designed as a written constitution. It is the example of best written constitution and first written constitution of the world. But if it is the first written constitution after 1728, what is the condition of the states before? It means we know that there are different types of kingdoms or empires existed in the world from the ancient period. How these states in the ancient period till the emergence of this first written constitution, how the states follow the constitution. So there is no particular written constitution from the ancient period, but the kingdoms or the empires, they existed with certain rules and regulations framed by the rulers according to their wish. They are not codified, they are not written in a documentation form. But according to the conditions, according to their personal views or personal wishes, the kings or the rulers, they used to frame certain rules and regulations for running the government. We can see the traces, or we can see some evidences available on different types of rules, which can be seen in the inscriptions of various types of kings or the rulers. Right? So, there is no particular documentation maintained by the ancient kings or the rulers to have this kind of written form of constitution, but according to their interests, according to their wish, they established certain rules and regulations, and traditionally they followed by the next rulers or the next kings. So, the written constitution is one which is in a written form, in a documentation form. All the provisions of a written constitution are written in the written form. Then coming to the second one, unwritten constitution. So, a constitution which is not in a written form is called unwritten constitution. The provisions of this constitution are not in a documentation form. They are not written. They are not codified. When the constitution is not in a written form, how the rulers are following the terms and conditions, how the government is running, how the government organizations or associations are performing their duties or functions without any documented form of rules and regulations. It means the system established by somebody, it will be followed by the next generation or the coming rulers. Traditionally, or based on the traditions or customs, the provisions of the constitution will be followed by the successors while ruling the countries. And all the people and rulers, they have knowledge on the rules and regulations to be followed while providing services to the people or to run the administration. If everybody knows about the functioning of these political institutions and organizations, so there is no need to have a written documentation. So we can take the example of British Constitution. The best example is British Constitution. The British Constitution is an unwritten constitution, best example of unwritten constitution. There are some more countries without having this kind of written constitution. They are following unwritten constitution only. So from the past, the rulers who ruled this Britain, they started certain provisions. They started certain rules and regulations to run the government. They established a kind of system. And generation after generation, the people or the rulers, they are following the same type of practices which are established earlier. So here, the Britain, we can understand that the rulers, the Tsar rulers from the 11th century onwards, so they have established a particular type of administrative systems and political systems, how they have to be run, how they have to function. On that, a proper system was designed by the earlier rulers, and the coming rulers, they followed the same type of practices. So there is no need to write down all the provisions of the constitution in a systematic manner. We are taking Britain Constitution as a best example for unwritten constitution, but the British Constitution, it also having certain written rules and regulations, or we can say some of the provisions are there which are in documented form. If you take Magna Carta, so in 1215, this Magna Carta, which is regarded as a Declaration of Human Rights, it was in the written form. It was in the written form. Right? And there are some advantages and disadvantages with these two types of constitutions. If the constitution is a written constitution, all the proposals or the provisions of the constitution are in written form. These terms and conditions or the rules and regulations mentioned in the constitution, they are not permanent in nature. According to the requirements, based on the changes happening in the country, so we can amend or we can change any provision of the constitution according to the needs. So, in order to change the provisions of any constitution, there will be a procedure to be followed. We have to follow a particular procedure in order to change the provisions of constitution. So, if it is a written constitution, so the written provisions of the constitution can be amended by following a particular process. Right? So, based on this kind of amendment process, again the constitutions are divided into two types. Right? Second type of classification, it is based on amendment process. Based on this amendment process, again the constitutions are divided into two types. So, first one is flexible constitution and second one is a rigid constitution. So, based on the process of amendment or changing the provisions of the constitution, again the constitutions are divided into flexible and rigid constitution. So, flexible, literally we mean that very easy to amend the provisions of the constitution. There will be an easy process, simple process to be followed to amend the provisions of the constitution in case of flexible constitution. We can take the example of British constitution again as a flexible constitution, because the British constitution is an unwritten constitution. Right? If the government want to change any provision of this constitution, it is a simple method or easy method is there to amend the constitution. Already the constitution of British is in unwritten form. When there is no written rules and regulations of or proposals or provisions of the constitution, with a simple method, with a simple majority method is followed to amend the provisions of this British constitution. Actually, the laws made by the government are divided into two types. There are two types of laws. One is constitutional law and second one is ordinary law. Law can be divided into constitutional law and ordinary law. Right? In case of flexible constitution, as we have taken the example of British constitution which is unwritten, there is no difference between these two types of laws. Normally, what is constitutional law? A law which is made as per the provisions of the constitution. A law which is designed as per the provisions of the constitution is called constitutional law. And ordinary law can be made by the government for day-to-day administrative practices without reference in the constitution. There is no reference given in the constitution for making these ordinary laws. According to the requirements and for running the day-to-day administration, the governments can make these ordinary laws at any time. So, In case of this flexible constitution, there is no difference between constitutional law and ordinary law, but with a method called simple majority method. Simple majority method is followed. Simple majority method is followed to amend the provisions like a constitutional law or ordinary law. Both the laws can be amended with a simple majority method. What is the simple majority method? So the legislature of the government, which is the most important organ of the government, it has the power to amend. The legislature has given the authority to amend any provision of the constitution. Right? So while amending these provisions of the constitution or to change the laws, there will be a method called simple majority method followed in the house. So in this legislature, so whoever the members present on the day when voting is conducted to amend any provision of the constitution, the members who present on the day in the house, they used to participate in the voting. Right? Out of the total members present on that day, if more than 50% members accept the amendment, then it will be done. The amendment will be done with this kind of more than 50% of members who present on that day and their approval. Based on their approval, it can be amended. This is the simple majority method to change the provisions of any constitution or to change the constitutional law or ordinary law. Now again we need to understand, so what is law? We are discussing about constitutional law and ordinary law. What is law? So a law is made by the government. A law is the policy or the strategy of the government in order to control our external behavior. In order to regulate our external behavior, a law can be made by the government. So why the government want to control our external behavior means, so we are the individuals surviving in the society. There is a possibility to raise any kind of disputes, conflicts among the people in the society. So it is the duty of the government to maintain law and order in the society. It is the responsibility of government to provide peaceful conditions for the survival of individuals in the society. So in order to maintain this law and order, it has to make certain laws to control the individual's external behavior. So different types of governments in different types of states, they make different types of laws in order to control our external behaviors. So normally the laws may be in a positive way or in a negative way. There are two dimensions of making laws. Some of the laws are having positive nature and some laws are having a negative nature. A positive law is going to direct the individual about what has to be done. It is indicating the individuals about particular activity of individual, in what way he has to perform this activity. Simply we can say our external behavior can be regulated with this kind of positive law. It is directing the individual about what to do. For example, all the people must pay taxes to the government. It is a positive indication given to the individuals that they should and they must pay taxes to the government. All the passengers has to follow the traffic rules. It is a positive direction given to the individuals. If anybody violates such kind of laws, then the state has the power to punish the violators. individuals can be punished by the government if they violate a law made by the government. In the same way, there are some negative laws, the laws which are having a negative nature. A negative law is directing the individual about the activities which are not to be performed. They are instructing the individuals not to do like this. For example, the government is making laws to restrict the individual's external behavior. The people should not involve in anti-social element activities. It means in order to maintain law and order, in order to protect the peaceful conditions, the state can make certain kind of regulations by making laws. They are directing the individuals not to involve in such kind of anti-social element activities. The people should not encourage any kind of terrorist activities, Naxalite activities like that. So, our activities are regulated by the government by making this kind of negative laws. If anybody violates this kind of negative laws also, punishable under the law. The state has the power to punish the individuals if they violate this kind of laws also. So, this is about law. So, in case of flexible constitution, just as we have seen the British constitution, which is unwritten constitution, there is a simple majority method to amend any law. Any law in the sense, it may be a constitutional law or an ordinary law. Right? Without any difference between these two types of laws, any law can be amended by following this simple majority method. Then, coming to the rigid law. So, opposite to this flexible, there is another type of constitution based on the amendment process that is called as rigid law. Rigid, literally it means difficult. A difficult method has to be followed to amend the provisions of a constitution. Any constitution can be amended. Any provision of the constitution can be amended. According to the, as I said, according to the requirements, the changes can be made in the constitutional provisions according to the needs and the requirements based on the changes happening in the governance or changes happening in the worldwide. So any kind of changes can be done. For example, our Indian constitution came into force from 1950. So we have 74 years of experience with the constitution. The same proposals which were mentioned in the constitution in 1950 may not be suitable to the present conditions. Lot of changes are occurring in the society. Number of changes are happening in the political institutions or the decisions taken by the political leaders. So according to the requirements, according to the needs and demands of the people, some changes has to be done. So any constitution or the proposal or provision of any constitution can be amended. But what type of process has to be followed to amend the provisions? On that we can differentiate between flexible and rigid constitution. So rigid constitution is one which can be amended by following a special procedure. So we can take the example of, again, USA Constitution as the best example for rigid constitution, because USA Constitution is the most rigid constitution of the world. After its enforcement for the past 260 years of experience, where USA Constitution, so it was amended nearly 24 times only. The most rigid constitution of the world is a USA Constitution. Now, so what kind of special procedure is followed to amend this rigid constitution? As I said, rigid means difficult, very difficult, or a tough method, a difficult method has to be followed to change the provisions of the constitution. So in such cases, there will be two different methods to be followed to change the provisions of the constitution. So as we have seen, two types of laws, constitutional laws and ordinary laws. So in case of rigid constitution, two different methods are followed to change these two types of laws. Right? In order to change the constitutional law, there will be a special and rigid method or difficult method is followed. So special majority method is observed to change the constitutional laws. So for the changing of this constitutional law, a special majority method has to be followed. Special majority method has to be followed. Right? What is this special majority means? So as I said, so when the legislature assemble for making any kind of changes or amendments in the constitutional law, right, in that legislative house, legislative body, so whoever the members present there, among these members, so a special majority means 2/3 majority. For 2/3 majority is required to amend the provisions of constitution. Generally 2/3 is observed as a special majority. Out of every 3 members, 2 members has to accept the amendment. Then in case of ordinary laws, again here we follow the same simple majority method to change the provisions of ordinary law. Right? So here in this ordinary laws can be amended with a simple majority method where more than 50% of the members who are present on that day at the house, so based on their approval, more than 50% approval or acceptance is required to change the provisions of this ordinary law. Then coming to the Indian Constitution, we have seen the example of British Constitution, which is unwritten. British Constitution is taken as an example of flexible constitution. The most flexible constitution is British Constitution because it itself is an unwritten constitution. We have seen the Constitution of USA, which is the first written constitution of the world and the most rigid constitution of the world. And you know, it is the smallest constitution of the world also. Smallest constitution. It contains only 7 articles. Only 7 articles. Smallest constitution of the world. And what is the condition of Indian Constitution? So, our Indian Constitution So, Indian Constitution, what is the condition of Indian Constitution? Whether it is a written constitution or an unwritten constitution. Or, so what kind of amendment method or process is followed in case of Indian Constitution? Right? If you see the Indian Constitution, the form of Indian Constitution, so the Indian Constitution is a written constitution. Almost 99% of provisions of Indian Constitution are in written form. They are codified by the experts. The provisions of Indian Constitution were designed in a systematic manner and everything was documented. It is a written constitution. But there are some provisions which are not written in the constitution, but we are following the provisions of unwritten constitution. It means some provisions are not mentioned in the constitution, but traditionally we are following certain activities in practice of the constitution. We are following some traditional practices from the beginning of 1950, when the constitution came into force. They are not written in the constitution, but in practice we are following as a good practices. We can take one or two examples regarding this unwritten feature of Indian Constitution. According to the Constitution, a citizen of India can become the President of India for any number of times. It means a person from India is eligible to become a President of India after winning the elections. There is no restriction or limitations imposed on any individual to become a president. In case of America, there is a condition mentioned in the Constitution that no American can become the President of America for more than 2 times. It means any citizen of America can become the president for only 2 times, not more than 2 times. It is clearly restricting the individuals to occupy the position of a President of America for not more than twice. But no such condition is mentioned in Indian Constitution. So any citizen of India can become the President of India for any number of times. But as on today, only one president served as a President of India for 2 times. Dr. Babu Rajendra Prasad, the first President of India, he was the only president in India served for 2 terms, or we can say 2 times. He became the President of India. In 1962, after completion of his term as a president for the 2nd time, he was asked by the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to contest for the 3rd time also. There is a possibility that he can become the President of India for 3rd time also, because Congress is the leading party by that time at national level and states level also. There is no proper opposition party at that time. Nehru made a proposal with Dr. Babu Rajendra Prasad to contest for the 3rd time, but simply he rejected this proposal. So he said that we have to give opportunity to the next generation or younger generation. So he made a kind of a good tradition here that a person cannot occupy a prestigious position for a long run period. We have to give this opportunity to the next generation. So the first president, Dr. Babu Rajendra Prasad, he established this kind of a good traditional practice. It is not mentioned in the Constitution, but he started this good tradition, and it is followed even today. This kind of offer and opportunity was also given to Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. After completion of his term as a president, so he was asked to contest for the next 2nd time also, but he also simply rejected. So this kind of feature which is not mentioned in the Constitution, it is not mentioned in the Constitution. As per the Constitution, a person of India can eligible to become the President of India for any number of times. There is no limitation like a USA Constitution. But as a good traditional practice here, we are following this practice from 1962 onwards. And we can take another example which is not mentioned in the Constitution, but we are following even today. It is another important feature of unwritten Constitution. Normally we know that the constitutional head of the state is a governor. As per the constitution, governor is head of the state. The entire administration of the state government is carried out in the name of governor. But who will appoint the governor? It is the President of India. So, governor of a state is appointed by the President of India. It is the reference clearly mentioned in the constitution. But there are two important traditional practices followed while appointing the governor of a state. They are not written in the Constitution of India. They are not mentioned. But as a good traditional practices, we are following in India two traditional practices. The first one is the governor can be appointed by the President of India, but no person can be appointed as a governor to his native state. A person cannot be appointed as a governor of his own state. Why? Because governor has to act as a constitutional head. He has to discharge his constitutional powers without any partiality. If a person is appointed as a governor to his native state, so definitely some kinds of local pressures may influence the governor because he belongs to the same state. So he can be manipulated, he can be influenced. He may not act impartially because of the local pressures or political pressures. So in order to avoid such kind of disturbance, you can say, so the person belongs to a particular state cannot be appointed as a governor in that particular state. It is a good traditional practice followed. And one more tradition while appointing the governor is observed in India. That is, the president will consult the chief minister of concerned state before making the appointment of governor. As a formality, the president is going to get any kind of information from the chief minister whether he is having any objections. Of course, the president has a power to appoint governor without consulting the chief minister. But as a good traditional practice, we can see the president is going to ask the opinion of chief minister of the concerned state before making the appointment of governor, because so the state administration can be performed efficiently if there is a good relation between cooperation between governor and chief minister. So such kind of unwritten features are there in India. So there is a practice of unwritten features. And what is the position of India on this nature, the process to be followed for amending, whether Indian constitution is a flexible constitution or it is a rigid constitution? So Indian constitution is the combination of both the features of flexible and rigid constitutions, right? So in Indian constitution, article 368 deals with the amendment process. Right now we have 3 types of amendment process followed in India to amend the provisions of constitution.